Hi, my name's Dayle Adams of Planning Ahead of Time, and on this week's Pack Chat, I'm speaking with Neil. Neil, we met recently and realised that there was some commonality in what we do, and I just wondered whether you can tell people and introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi Dale. Great to be here today. So my name is Neil and I run Plan with Neil, which is an independent financial advice firm based in Coventry and Warwickshire. But really kind of my aim is to make people kind of have happier, kind of more contented conversations around money, whatever the time of life they're in.
Well, mine is planning for end of life. Yours is planning with money. But I was to say, there is some sort of crossing over in that, really. So, what do you do to help people plan?
So people have lots of different pain points about money. I often call it kind of the 3 a.m. thoughts that pop into their head where they go, okay, what about this? And I haven't thought about this. Okay. And obviously, at different points that they can occur. And sometimes that is when they are kind of planning ahead for the future. But it's also, when they're kind of coming towards their end of their life, thinking about, okay, well, what does it look like in terms of either the care that they may need or also the situation that they may leave for their families as well.
Yeah. Again, I always say that, what's it going to look like? Or what do you want it to look like? And for me, it's what do you want it to look like as you move towards end of life, but also, spiritually, how would you want it to look after you've died? What do you want to sort of leave behind?
Yeah, I do agree. I think with all of these things, it's things that people often don't want to think about. But once you do start thinking about it, you go, okay, well, actually, there is a plan about it, and there are things that can be done from the kind of the basics in terms of power of attorneys and kind of making sure that those things are in place to other scenarios in terms of, okay, well, what happens to my property? If I'm either single or if I'm living with someone, what does all of that look like? As well as, okay, um, if the care home fees are going to be, £7,000 a month or anything like that, what is the approach? Is it going to be feasible that I'm going to be able to afford those fees? Am I going to be in kind of local authority care instead? And then looking at kind of where things such as kind of cash and kind of investments kind of may come into play with all of it as well. So and gifting, etc. So there's lots of different strategies that people can look to employ. I think the main thing that I'd advocate is trying to kind of avoid the head in the sand scenario. Okay, because for some people they'll say, okay, well actually we've got this scenario and we can do X, Y, Z. Or for someone else, it might be doing scenario A, B, C. But if you don't deal with it or kind of think about it, then the other scenario is you've just got that underlying anxiety at all times of I don't know what I'm doing with all of this, and that's really what we can look to eliminate by planning, both on the spiritual side as well as on the financial side.
Yeah. I don't think you're ever too young to start planning, because we have no idea what's going to happen in our lifetime. Do you agree with that? Do you think there's an age that you should start planning, or is there an age where people tend to start coming to you?
Yeah, so I deal with clients at kind of all ages, but in terms of the kind of planning for towards kind of later life, again, kind of the earlier the better. One of the problems that we have, and I'm sure you're aware of, is the kind of the political kicking it down the line of things such in terms of care home fees and changes in regulation around things like pensions and all these types of things, which makes it incredibly difficult for someone to say, okay, if I can build up a pot of X amount for in the future, that can help cover my care costs. Whereas at the moment, there's so many different variables and unknowns, and really, when kind of people are looking to the future, within their spheres of control, it's probably saying, okay, well, actually, what can I do? And, is it kind of like building up a pot for yourself, or is it kind of, gifting away a pot to ensure it's not caught by things like inheritance tax, etc., in the future, and trying to go, okay, well, actually, for me, what's the best objectives for myself? The other bit, which I always kind of stress with clients, is actually you've got to be selfish about these things. You've got to really kind of look after yourself. A lot of clients will want to think about, you know, they want to give this to their children or their grandchildren, all of these different things. Whereas actually, I'm sure the kind of children and grandchildren actually would rather them ensure that they are protected and getting the best care and enjoying the best retirement that they can, rather than thinking about a scenario which may or may not come up in 20 or 30 years' time once they've passed. So that is something that, I really kind of try to stress with clients about, enjoying the bits that you can, and being a bit selfish as well.
Yeah, that's really true because my gran did that. She was going without, and it was because she wanted to make sure she left something to
Yeah,
her children. And at the time, they were all totally self-sufficient, but we do want to pass something on, and she did, and that was what she wanted to do. So it's quite interesting you say that. It's just brought that to mind. It's not something I'd thought about for a long time. But yeah, it is people have that desire to gift and leave something, even if it means them going without to
yeah,
enable them to do it. But I suppose that is what we do through our lifetime. Again, we look to take care of our families and our loved ones, and we still want that into our later years and obviously on our death to ensure that we pass something on. So planning for retirement, then you've just mentioned something you do?
Yes, and I think the way that I talk about retirement with clients is that there's different levels. Okay, so the first level is effectively you just retired and you're existing, so you might have just a state pension and maybe a small kind of pension income where you're able to possibly kind of get by, but you really kind of haven't got um lots of kind of funds available, and when there's things like council tax increases each year, that can be a worry. Okay. The second level is what I call the dignified retirement. And so the dignified retirement is where you've got the funds available to um, not worry about things like council tax in your 80s, etc. You obviously moan about it because everyone does, but you've got kind of funds available on that side. Okay. The next part is then what we call kind of I call the fun fund. Okay. So what we know is that kind of generally, and obviously big generalizations here, that clients that are in their 60s and their 70s are more likely to be driving cars, maybe going on holidays compared to clients in their 80s and 90s. Okay. And so with that, what we want is clients to have a fund available that they can spend and enjoy. Okay, none of us know how long we're going to live for, and so if they've got the fund available, they can kind of spend their money and enjoy their money in their kind of earlier years of retirement, whilst they're kind of healthier, whilst they're kind of more active, and enjoy and spend their money there. One of the big issues I often see with clients is people that have kind of built up a pot, but actually they haven't spent it fast enough in their 60s and maybe early 70s. So when it comes to their early 80s and 90s, they're not in the health and the position to enjoy those funds. Okay. And obviously, as you kind of alluded to a minute ago, Dale, obviously some people um, maybe not have maybe don't have expensive holiday tastes, or they don't kind of feel the desire or need to be kind of spending so much of their fund, and that's when then the kind of fourth level comes in, which is then thinking about longer term, either ensuring they've got kind of adequate funds available to support any care needs they may have in the future, or also supporting their kind of wider family. And typically these days, it's not uncommon to see basically four generations in play all in one go, where you've got their children, their grandchildren, their great grandchildren. That is kind of very common with clients. And so it's looking at all of these areas and saying, well, where do you sit in your kind of retirement journey? Which level are you currently on? And what's achievable, and how can you get to the other levels, and having those conversations with clients.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because you're absolutely right that four generations can now exist. I mean, yeah, over Christmas we had three generations all out together one night, and you think it's normal now.
Yeah,
It's totally normal, but actually, probably wasn't that long ago that it wasn't. You were looking after yourself and your children, and that was it. But
yeah,
we all live an awful lot longer now. And the trouble is that because we're living so much longer, we often do need help and support in those later years because we can't look after ourselves at home. And we need the care home and the hospices that are available. But that comes at a cost. And so it does need to be considered or factored in when we're looking at actually, like you say, retirement and later life.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. I think kind of over the last 30 years, how retirement has changed for people over that time. And also I remember kind of my kind of grandparents and kind of when they hit kind of say 70, and how they were when they were 70 compared to say my parents when they reached those ages. And obviously there's retirement villages and loads of different activities available now, um, where the social lives of 70-year-olds is probably better than a lot of social lives of people in their 40s in terms of the different activities and bits that they're going through. And it's with everything, it's trying to be intentional with what people want to do, how they want to spend their time, spend their money. And kind of my role is really helping people kind of align their money to their objectives, and really kind of focusing on your objectives. We can spend so much time looking at so many different tactics and different things that can be done, utilizing ISA allowances and inheritance tax planning, etc., etc. But it's really going, okay, well, actually, what is going to be the key thing, the key objectives for yourselves? So it might be for some people, okay, that when the time comes and you pass away, that actually all my financial affairs are fairly straightforward and in order. So actually, my family can spend the time grieving me rather than having to deal with all the paperwork. Okay, so it's things like that which I think are key as part of the process.
Can you help people with pensions as well?
Yes, so really in the UK there are kind of two types of pension. So there are kind of things like kind of old final salary pensions or defined benefit pensions, which give a guaranteed income for the rest of their lives, which normally go up with inflation, and often leave an income to a spouse once someone passes away. And they're great in terms of guaranteeing, a dignified retirement over time. Okay, because that's never going to run out. The other type of pension is kind of more common today, often known as a SIP or a personal pension. Basically, it's called a defined contribution pension, and that really is a pot of money. And often people will have various different defined contribution pensions that are kind of here, there, and everywhere, that often get lost track over the years. And often with those types of pensions, we can kind of, pull all of those together and simplify them and then work out, okay, well, actually, what is the best approach with it? Is it to take a guaranteed income over the rest of their lives, or is it to take the income more flexibly? Again, going back to the levels of retirement I talked about a minute ago, where in their kind of 60s and 70s, they might choose to take out more income from the pension over the first few years, knowing that kind of later on it will drop off, but actually it will drop off when, the holidays have reduced, maybe kind of less driving as well. Okay, so yeah, I help clients with what I do for the clients, which I think is key for clients in terms of retirement planning and later life planning, is something called cash flow forecasting, where we use lots of different, well, bits of software to say, this is where you are as of right now, and for the rest of your life, this is what it would look like. And then let's do some scenarios. So let's simulate if actually the worst was to happen to one of you as a couple. Now, where does that leave the other person? Okay, and how do we then kind of try and mitigate those gaps? Because these are the conversations that people don't really want to have with each other, but by having these conversations, and having a third party like myself involved, people can go, okay, actually, it's maybe not as bad as I thought, or okay, there is a gap, but we can cover that gap by doing X, Y, Z, or putting certain things in place. And that's the purpose of all of these things, is having kind of the upfront conversations, making it kind of real, and then being able to kind of understand the best steps forward after that.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. At the end of the day, we're living longer, so we're retired for longer. Pensions obviously lead into that retirement, and having a plan is very crucial to make sure that people can actually enjoy their later years and not be worrying about it. There's so much on the press all the time about pensioners struggling and without anything. So again, this planning ahead is so important, and it's been very good. I know it's just a snippet of the bits that you do, but I do think it's really interesting and important that people look at what will their later life look like, end of life, but also later life, which is what we're discussing here, because it does then bring them peace of mind. It does mean they can also look after their family, and they can make sure that they're planning what they want to do with their money, because at the end of the day, it is their money.
Yeah.
And it's something I speak to clients about, and you've said it, it's not just about being selfish, but it is about saying, this is my money, so how do I make best end to my life that I possibly can?
Yeah.
And, so if people would like to get hold of you, Neil, and find out more about their finances, how to look after them, how to deal with retirements and pensions, how do they get hold of you?
Yeah, so my kind of website is www.planwithneil.com. On there, it's got the telephone number, so people can give me a call, or you can also directly book an appointment through the website. The first appointment's always completely free, and all it is a relaxed chat, either via a video call, or I'll come around to your property and we just chat about your situation. Okay, and some people it'll be suitable for, some people it won't be suitable for. But what I kind of can almost kind of guarantee is that by the end of that conversation, you will feel hopefully a bit more kind of happier and contented about your situation, and know some of the routes forward with all of that.
Lovely. Okay, well, thank you very much for your time today, Neil. Really appreciate it. It's been good to speak with you.
Thanks, Dale.